Hi. How would you feel if someone comes and tells you heaven is closed and you cannot get into heaven? Well, we do have a character in the story Heaven is Not Closed, where the character tells to one of his very close members of his community that the heaven is closed. Before we look into the details and into what the story is about, today's class would be an introduction to the story Heaven is Not Closed, written by the most influential writer from Botswana. Heaven is Not Closed is a wonderful short story written by a famous writer from South Africa named Bessie Head. Bessie Head was born in 1937 and reached her recognition closer towards her death, which was in 1986. Her full name, Bessie Amelia Emery Head, well known as Bessie Head, as I've already mentioned, is a South African writer and considered to be Botswana's the most influential writer. Before we actually come to the story, which is taken from a collection of stories, we need to look in detail into Bessie Head's life, her community living, her dealings with the villages that she was in, that she was associated with, and only then can we really move on to the story because all of it are connected. Let me give you a very brief idea about her family, about her childhood. She is born to a white woman and a black man at a time when interracial relationships were completely illegal in South Africa. But yet, she was born to a white woman and a non-white man. She was initially adopted by a white family, and in a very few weeks' time, they realized that she was not white. And as a result, she was sent back to the authorities from where she was adopted to. The reason as to why she was adopted by this white family is because Bessie Head's mother was hospitalized in a mental hospital for a very long time, and Bessie Head was born in one of the mental hospitals. Bessie Head's mother was not allowed to keep her daughter because of her health condition, but did not fail to give her her own name, Bessie Head. So the mother's name is also Bessie Amelia Emery, and Head is from her father. So as we realize that she was born and brought up initially in the mental hospital, but very soon transferred to a white family, and then she was again sent back to the authorities, and then she was given to a non-white community where she was raised by Nellie Heathcote. So Nellie Heathcote becomes her mother, and she was very fond of Nellie Heathcote. She had a wonderful childhood, and she was very well recognized in her family, in the surrounding, in the community that she was in, and she led quite a happy life. And it is at this community where she started studying and realized her love for books. And she was too much into reading, and initially she did not like going to school, but the moment she realized that she could get or gain knowledge through the reading of her books, that she realized that she has to get back to school, and that is how she started studying and became one of the best students of the school. Unfortunately, very soon, at a very young age, she had the first trauma of her life. The trauma was the authorities one fine day, told little Bessie that Nellie Heathcote was not her mother and that she was born to a white woman. She just could not take this because she was not allowed to go back to Nellie Heathcote's family during her Christmas holidays when she was staying in a boarding. And this is a very first traumatic incident in her life, and this incident left her devastated, and she completely withdrew into herself. A little later, she comes out of this traumatic situation. She is into studying, she is into reading, and finally attains her teacher training certificate and becomes a teacher in their community. And while she was living in this community, she had a lot of friends, especially non-Christian friends. Her background was of a Christian origin, but she had a lot of non-Christian friends, and especially something interesting is that this community also consisted of Indians, and it was these Indians where she was mostly associated with, and she was in love with the religion of the Indians, and thus she was influenced by Hinduism and did not really like the principles and the faith that was involved in the Christian beliefs. This religious aspect is what we can see in this short story, Heaven is Not Closed. And she was also greatly influenced by Gandhiji. And she got to know about Gandhiji through the Indian friends or from this community that she was in. Slowly we see that she moves to Johannesburg, in order to teach, again fond of reading, and she also becomes the spokesperson for a minority group for the black community, and also a spokesperson for Pan-African. A political union, a political group that worked towards for the betterment of the inhabitants of Africa. She became the spokesperson of this movement as well. And writing became her number one weapon in order to address situations of the black community. After all, she's had a number of personal struggles in between all the political struggles that she had. After all the political and the personal struggles that she has, she finally moves to Botswana. Botswana is very important because she is in a village here and she's involved in a lot of the groups that belong to the minority race, and she works for them, and most of her stories are written from Botswana. So this is an important period in her life. Quite interestingly, this devastation and withdrawal into her own life, gets back to her, and just like her mother, we can see that she has also had a major psychotic episode, and she was also hospitalized in the mental hospital. And unfortunately, she dies at a very early age. You can see here, she dies at a very early age when people started noticing her, when people started recognizing her works, and she was slowly attaining the acclaim of her writings. Unfortunately, she dies at the age of 48 from hepatitis. So this is just a detailed historical background of Bessie Head. Now let's move into her writings. She's written 3 novels. All of these novels are autobiographical in nature, and all her works are set in Sero. Sero is an urban village in Botswana. That is why I said Botswana is an important period in her life. So all her works, most of her works are set in Sero, which is a small, an urban village in Botswana. And along with these autobiographical novels, she's written a number of short stories, and she is more recognized for the collection The Collector of Treasures. This collection is important. This was published in 1977. It contains 13 stories, and one among them is Heaven is Not Closed. So this is a collection of stories that she's written. Quite interestingly, before this was published in 1977, some of the stories were published in journals and in magazines before the collection actually was published. Now, the subtitle of this, the Collector of Treasures, is Botswana Village Tales. This is a subtitle of this collection, The Collector of Treasures, Botswana Village Tales. And she, in fact, started her writing only when she was settled in Botswana. And she really took utmost care in making sure that one story trailed into another. As I've already mentioned, there are 13 stories in this collection. These stories are pure fiction, but some of the stories mentioned in The Collector of Treasures, the sources that she takes is mostly from oral traditions of their community and also some historical sources that she can associate with the community. And there are several anecdotes that she uses in these stories, and these anecdotes are from her own life in Sero. Something which is very interesting about all these stories are they're all rebellious tone that she uses. And this rebellious tone serves as an antidote to the colonial dictum of the whites being the saviors of the society. And this is a common factor that we see in all the 13 stories, and this is something that we can see in the story prescribed for us, Heaven is Not Closed. And most of the stories mentioned here, and especially Heaven is Not Closed, is or rather talks on the struggle of the Botswanan women, their experiences with their society, the culture and the traditions that they are in. And Major themes as to what we can see in these stories would be racial oppression, the patriarchal superiority. They're all vividly discussed. I'm not going much into the details of the theme or even in fact the story, but I just wanted to give you an introduction to the background setting, her history of her writings before I really move into the actual story. For today's class, I would like to introduce to you the characters of the story Heaven is Not Closed. And in the next class, we would deal with the setting, the story, and the thematic analysis of the story. Heaven is Not Closed is in the third person narrative, and it is narrated by Modus, one of the characters, and he is the brother of the major character of the story, Raloke. So as we see, we've already seen two characters. Modus is the person who narrates the entire story, the story of Raloke. And then we also have the major character, that is none other than Galathabe, the lady of the story. And this story actually explores the theme of faith and acceptance. Initially, I started off saying about her religious disbeliefs and beliefs, and this is something that we can see in this story as well. So we have Modus the narrator, we have Raloke, we have Galathabe, and another important character, the missionary. So the first character, Galathabe, is very important. She is a devoted Christian, somebody who prays daily, does not take leave from church, and every time you look at this character, she is with the Bible and she is in constant conversation with God. So in total, you could say that she is a devoted Christian. She wants to marry Raloke in the Christian custom. For which she gets advice from the missionary, and taking in for a surprise, she was excommunicated from the church. Let me not go into the details, but this is about Galathabe, a devoted Christian. And Raloke, who is a widower, loses his wife during childbirth, and after the rituals and customs that follows with the death of his first wife, slowly falls in love with Galathabe and would like to marry her. But remember, Raloke is not a believer. So here we have Galathabe, who would like to get married to Raloke, who believes in the Serovian customs and rituals or their traditions. So he is not willing to get married according to the Christian custom, but here we have Galathabe, who is a Christian, who is a believer and would like to get married according to the Christian custom. And we'll have to see what happens. We have Modus. Not much is mentioned about Modus, but we do know that the entire story is revealed to us or to the audience, to the readers, through Modus. And thus, this becomes a third person narrative. The missionary is somebody very important who thinks he is a follower of Christ, but does not like blacks. He feels that they are just beggars and thieves, and all the rituals that these blacks follow are against the kingdom of heaven. And as a result, he does not like the black community. So Galtabe is actually caught in between the missionary and Raloke. She loves Raloke. She cannot move away from her Christian customs because she is a devoted Christian. She prays every day. So she is in a fix. And here we have the missionary who is against the blacks, their tradition and their culture. So what next? Let's take a look at this in the next class. Thank you.